The pop filter made a wet sound when my breath hit it. Thwap, thwap, like a tiny drum made of stretched pantyhose. I'd forgotten that sound, forgotten how the foam smelled faintly of dust and old saliva, how the microphone arm creaked when you adjusted it, a rusty joint that needed WD-40 but never got it because you were always too busy, always recording just one more take. My hands were shaking, not the violent tremor of fear, but something subtler. The vibration of a tuning fork held too long, the aftershock of something that hadn't happened yet, or had already happened. The timeline was a snake eating its tail, and I was somewhere in the middle, being digested. "You okay?" The voice came from my left. I turned, and there was Marcus, 23 years old, his beard still patchy on his chin, wearing that ridiculous vintage Pixies t-shirt he'd found at a thrift store on Melrose, the one with the bleach stain on the hem. He wouldn't wear this shirt in 3 years. Wouldn't wear any shirts, actually, because he'd be dead. Cardiac arrest at an EDM festival in Palm Springs, molly laced with fentanyl, his body found in a porta potty at 3 a.m. But today, right now, he was alive and asking if I was okay. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded strange in my ears, higher than I remembered, younger. "Just first day jitters," Marcus grinned, showing the gap between his front teeth that he'd get fixed in 2024. Or would have gotten fixed. Conditional tense, future perfect, past imperfect. Grammar was breaking down around me like wet tissue paper. "Dude, it's a podcast, not open heart surgery. Just talk into the mic and be yourself." He twisted the cap off a La Croix, pamplemousse, always pamplemousse, and the carbonation hissed like static. "Besides, you've been planning this forever. Inherited, right? Stories about family heirlooms and the weird shit people pass down? It's gold. Inherited." The word hit me like a physical thing. A stone dropped in still water. Ripples expanding outward, disturbing the surface of everything I thought I knew about what was real and what was memory. Because I had planned it forever. Spent 2 years researching, interviewing people, building a spreadsheet of potential episodes. I'd recorded a pilot in my bedroom closet. The acoustics were better surrounded by winter coats, and sent it to 12 production companies. 11 rejections. 1 maybe. Then Claire, my sister, had asked to listen to it. "Just to see what you're working on," she'd said, her eyes wide and innocent, the same eyes that had convinced our parents she hadn't eaten the last of the birthday cake, hadn't borrowed my car without asking, hadn't kissed my prom date behind the gym. "I'm so proud of you, Soph. Really." 3 months later, her show had dropped. Heirlooms, 1 letter different, close enough to make the lawyers shrug. Spotify exclusive. 7 million downloads in the first season, a book deal with Random House, a TV development deal with Netflix. And me? I'd been 34 years old, working at a social media marketing agency, managing Instagram accounts for boutique dog food companies, drinking wine alone in my studio apartment, and wondering when exactly my life had become a waiting room for something that was never going to arrive. Until the night I'd stepped off the curb on Sunset Boulevard, distracted by my phone, scrolling through Claire's latest Instagram post, her at the Spotify green room party, champagne flute raised, caption reading, "Dreams do come true," and hadn't seen the Tesla running the red light. The impact had sounded like a thunderclap inside my skull. And then, nothing. And then, thwap, thwap. The pop filter, the dust smell, Marcus alive and grinning, LaCroix sweating condensation onto the folding table we'd set up in his garage, surrounded by cardboard boxes of his ex-girlfriend's stuff, and a broken elliptical machine draped in Christmas lights that didn't work. I looked down at my hands, really looked at them. The scar on my right thumb from the mandolin accident was gone. The callus on my left ring finger from typing was softer. My nails were painted this electric blue I'd been obsessed with in my 20s, a color called Bikini So Teeny that I'd stopped wearing because Claire said it looked cheap. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An iPhone 8. I'd upgraded to the 13 Pro before I died. Before I pulled it out. The lock screen was a photo of me and Claire at Coachella, flower crowns wilted in the desert heat, our arms around each other's shoulders. We were smiling. We looked happy. The date on the screen read, April 3rd, 2019. 7 years ago. 6 months before I'd show Claire my podcast pilot. My heart started doing something complicated in my chest. A jazz rhythm, all syncopation and unexpected beats. I knew that feeling, had felt it the moment before the Tesla's grill had filled my vision, when time had stretched like taffy and I'd understood. with perfect crystalline clarity that I was about to die with nothing to show for my life except a LinkedIn profile that said social media specialist and a refrigerator full of expired yogurt. But this wasn't death. This was something else entirely. Earth to Sophie. Marcus waved his hand in front of my face. Seriously, you're being weird. Did you take something? Because I told you, that edible from the dispensary on Fairfax is no joke. Trevor ate a whole one and thought he was a lamp for 6 hours. I'm fine, I said automatically. Then, because I needed to anchor myself to something real, something that would prove this wasn't a dying hallucination or a coma dream. What day is it? Wednesday, April 3rd. The day we're recording your pilot, remember? You made me block out the whole afternoon. I had to cancel on... What year? He blinked. 2019. Okay, you're definitely high. 2019. April, before the podcast, before Claire, before everything. The universe had given me a do-over. The universe or the Tesla or the specific cocktail of brain chemicals released during traumatic death, I didn't know and didn't care. What mattered was that I was here now, with knowledge of the future folded up inside me like a map to buried treasure. I knew which podcasts would blow up, knew that true crime would peak and then collapse under its own weight, knew that the real money was in narrative storytelling, in intimacy, in making people feel less alone. I knew that Spotify would start offering exclusive deals in late 2019, that they'd pay obscene amounts for the right shows, that they were hungry for content that felt authentic and different. And I knew that Inherited, my idea, my research, my interviews, would be exactly what they were looking for, if I launched it first. Let's record, I said, sliding the headphones over my ears. They were cheap, these headphones. Amazon Basics, the kind that made your ears sweat after 20 minutes, but they were mine. Everything here was mine. The idea, the script, the future. Marcus hit record and the software beeped 3 times. I leaned into the microphone and began. My grandmother left me a thimble when she died. The words came easier than they should have. I'd written this script 7 years ago. Yesterday, in another life, memorized it, performed it alone in my closet with winter coats as an audience. But now, knowing what it would become, knowing that Claire would hear this and her eyes would go calculating, that she'd start asking questions, taking notes, building her own version of my dream. Now the words tasted different, sharper, mine. Not a fancy thimble, I continued, my voice finding its rhythm. Not silver or antique, just a plastic thimble from a drugstore sewing kit, cracked on one side, smelling faintly of the cedar chest where she kept it. When I was a kid, I thought it was the most boring inheritance in the world. My cousin got her wedding ring. My brother got her collection of first edition books. I got a thimble. But my grandmother used that thimble to sew blankets for every baby born in her neighborhood for 40 years. She used it to repair my grandfather's work shirts, to hem my mother's prom dress, to stitch the American flag she hung on her porch every 4th of July. That thimble touched thousands of moments of her life. It has a geography of tiny dents and scratches, a topography of care. And that's what this podcast is about, not the things we inherit that end up on Antiques Roadshow, not the obvious treasures, but the small, strange, deeply personal objects that carry the weight of human lives, the things that shouldn't matter, but somehow do. I paused. Let the silence breathe. I'm Sophie Chen, and this is Inherited. Marcus gave me a thumbs up through the garage window. His face was split by a massive grin. I kept going, recording the 3 sample segments I'd planned. The woman who inherited her father's grocery list from the day he died, still in his pocket. The man who got his grandmother's false teeth and couldn't bring himself to throw them away. The daughter who received nothing but her mother's recipe for pot roast written on a water-stained index card. The stories poured out of me. I'd interviewed these people years ago, would interview them. The timeline was a pretzel, but I remembered every detail. The crack in Mrs. Harrison's voice when she described finding the grocery list, the way James Chen, no relation, laughed uncomfortably when talking about the false teeth in their velvet box on his mantel, the specific shade of yellow that Sarah's mother had used for the index card, legal pad yellow, the color of lawyers and grocery stores and American bureaucracy. When I finished, my throat was raw and my hands were still shaking, but it was a different kind of shaking now. Not the vibration of uncertainty, but the tremor of possibility. Marcus stopped the recording. Oh, the sudden silence was profound. The kind of quiet that feels like pressure, like the inside of a seashell held to your ear. "Holy shit," he said finally. Sophie, that was really good. Like, really, really good. You should send this out. Like, today." "I will," I said. And then, because I needed to say it out loud, needed to make it real, "I'm going to pitch it to Spotify." "Spotify? Don't they just do music?" "They're getting into podcasts. They bought Gimlet and Anchor. They're about to start offering exclusive deals." I saw his expression, confusion mixed with suspicion, and realized I'd said too much. There was no way I should know this. Gimlet had been acquired in February, but it wasn't common knowledge outside the industry. Anchor would be announced next month. "How do you know all that?" Marcus asked. "I read it somewhere." I shrugged, aiming for casual and landing somewhere near manic. "I've been researching the podcast industry for the pitch." He seemed to accept this, or at least pretended to. Marcus was good at pretending. It was how he'd hidden his drug use for 2 years, how he'd convinced everyone he was fine right up until he wasn't. But I couldn't think about that now. Couldn't think about the Marcus who would die, the Sophie who had died, the sister who had stolen everything and smiled while doing it. I had work to do. The coffee shop on Vermont Avenue smelled like burnt espresso and failed screenplays. Every table was occupied by someone with a laptop, their faces illuminated by the ghostly glow of Microsoft Word or Final Draft, their expressions ranging from determined to desperate. This was Los Angeles, where everyone was one good pitch away from changing their life. I'd chosen a table in the corner next to the bathroom, where the Wi-Fi signal was strongest. My laptop, a 2017 MacBook Air with a crack in the screen and a battery that lasted 45 minutes if you were lucky, sat open in front of me. The cursor blinked in an empty email to spotify.podcasts@spotify.com. Subject, I stared at the subject line. In my previous life, I'd never gotten this far, never had the courage to pitch directly, to bypass the agents and the production companies, and just ask. I'd been too afraid of rejection, too convinced that my ideas weren't good enough, too willing to show Claire my work and ask for her opinion because she was the successful one, the confident one, the one who made things happen. Claire, who would steal my podcast idea in 2 months. Claire, who was probably at yoga right now, or brunch, or whatever the hell she did on Wednesday afternoons when she wasn't working at the boutique PR firm that represented B-list influencers and CBD companies. My phone buzzed. A text from her. "Coffee this weekend. Want to hear about your podcast thing?" The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that she could just take up space in my life, my thoughts, my creative process. That her interest was supportive rather than predatory. That podcast thing wasn't dismissive. I looked at the text for a long moment, watching the ellipsis appear and disappear as she typed something else, then deleted it, then typed again. "Also, Mom wants us both at dinner Sunday. She's making that chicken thing you like. Our mother's lemon chicken? No, with the olives and the preserved lemons and the couscous that was always slightly too dry. I'd eaten it 1,000 times, would eat it again on Sunday, had eaten it at my last family dinner before the accident, when Claire had announced her Netflix deal and Mom had cried happy tears, and Dad had opened the expensive wine and I'd sat there smiling, my face a mask, my heart a stone. I deleted Claire's text without responding. Then I returned to the email and began to type. Subject, podcast pitch, inherited narrative interview series. Dear Spotify podcast team, I'm writing to pitch a narrative podcast series that explores the small, strange, and deeply personal objects we inherit from the people we love. Not the obvious treasures, but the things that shouldn't matter. A thimble, a grocery list, a recipe card. Why, the objects that carry the weight of human lives. Inherited is a 30-minute episodic series that combines intimate interviews with sound-rich storytelling. Each episode focuses on a single object and the family history it represents, the complicated emotions, the unresolved grief, the unexpected joy of discovering that love lives in the smallest things. I've attached a pilot episode that demonstrates the concept and tone. The show is designed for broad appeal while maintaining emotional depth. It's This American Life Meets the Moth with a focus on the material culture of memory. I believe this series would resonate with Spotify's audience and align with your move into original narrative content. The stories are universal, the production is scalable, and the format allows for both seasonal arcs and standalone listening. I'd love to discuss this further. Best, Sophie Chen. I read it 3 times, checking for typos, second-guessing every word. Too formal? Not formal enough? Should I mention my marketing background? No, that made me sound like I wasn't a real creator, like I was a business person playing at art. My finger hovered over the send button. In my previous life, I would have saved this as a draft. Would have shown it to someone first, probably Claire, and asked if it was good enough. Would have waited for permission that would never come. But I died on Sunset Boulevard with nothing to show for my life except regret and expired yogurt. I hit send. The email whooshed away into the digital void, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, but hatching. Like there was something alive in there that had been waiting to breathe. The response came 3 days later. I was at work, a social media marketing agency called BuzzHive that occupied a converted warehouse in Culver City, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a kombucha tap in the break room. My cubicle was decorated with a succulent I kept forgetting to water and a motivational poster that said "Create content, not excuses," in a font that was trying very hard to be edgy. I was writing Instagram captions for a client who sold artisanal dog treats shaped like croissants when my phone buzzed. Email from podcast@spotify.com. Subject, podcast pitch, inherited, narrative interview series. My heart stopped, actually stopped. I felt it, the pause, the skip, the moment when the muscle forgot its job. Then it started again. Double time. A drum solo in my chest. I clicked on the email. Hi, Sophie. Thanks for reaching out. We listened to your pilot and really loved the concept and your storytelling approach. The production quality is great, and the emotional tone is exactly what we're looking for in original content. We'd like to set up a call to discuss this further. Would you be available for a conversation next week? Looking forward to hearing from you. Best, Rachel Kim, head of podcast development, Spotify. I read it again. Then again. Then I screenshot it and texted it to Marcus, who responded with 15 exclamation points and a gif of Kermit the Frog flailing. They liked it. Spotify liked my podcast. The universe had given me a second chance, and I was taking it with both hands. The call was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m. I took a late lunch from BuzzHive, telling my boss I had a dentist appointment, and drove to Marcus's garage because it was the only place I knew I'd have privacy and good enough internet. Rachel Kim sounded exactly like her emails. Warm but professional. Enthusiastic but measured. She was maybe 35, with a slight East Coast accent that suggested education and ambition. So, Sophie, tell me about your vision for the series, she said after the pleasantries. I'd prepared for this. Spent the last 5 days rehearsing in my car, in the shower, in line at Trader Joe's. I knew what would work because I'd seen Claire do it. Had watched her pitch meetings on Instagram stories, watched her talk about finding the emotional truth and creating space for authentic connection. But I also knew something Claire didn't. I knew which specific stories would resonate, knew that the episode about the Vietnam vet who inherited his father's Purple Heart would go viral, knew that the woman who received her grandmother's collection of hotel soaps would make people cry, knew that the finale, about a mother who left her daughter nothing but a voicemail saying, "I love you," that the daughter couldn't bear to delete, would break the internet. The vision is simple, I said. Everyone has inherited something. Maybe it's valuable, maybe it's trash, but it meant something to the person who left it behind, and that meaning is a doorway into understanding the people we've lost. Each episode is a small story that opens into a bigger one, about family, about memory, about the weird ways we try to hold on to the people we love after they're gone. I love that, Rachel said. I could hear her typing. And you see this as seasonal or ongoing? Seasonal? 10 episodes per season. Each season could have a different thematic focus. Season 1 is physical objects. Season 2 could be recipes. Season 3 could be letters or voicemails or digital legacies. There's endless material. More typing. Then, what's your background in audio production? This was the tricky part. In my previous life, I'd had no real background, just the pilot I'd made in my closet. But now I had 7 years of future knowledge, 7 years of listening to podcasts that didn't exist yet, understanding what worked and what didn't. I've been producing audio stories independently for about 2 years. I lied smoothly, mostly personal projects while working in social media marketing. I have a background in storytelling and content creation, and I've been studying the podcast medium intensively. I believe in learning by doing. Well, your pilot certainly shows that. The sound design is subtle but effective, and your interview technique is really strong. You make people feel comfortable sharing vulnerable moments. Because I'd already done this once, I didn't say, because I remembered exactly how to ask questions that opened people up, how to hold silence until they filled it, how to make them forget the microphone was there. "Thank you," I said instead. "So here's what I'm thinking." Rachel's voice shifted into business mode. "We're looking to acquire original podcasts for Spotify exclusivity. We'd offer you a deal for 2 seasons, 20 episodes total, with an option for more based on performance, full production support, marketing push, the works. You'd maintain creative control, but you'd be working with our editorial team to refine the episodes." My hands started shaking again. I gripped the edge of Marcus's folding table to steady them. "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" "We'd want to launch in September, which gives you about 5 months to produce the first season. It's tight, but doable with our support." September 2019. 3 months before Claire would launch Heirlooms on her own website, building buzz through her PR connections before getting picked up by Spotify in early 2020. Except that wouldn't happen now, because I was going to happen first. "I can do that," I said. "Absolutely." "Great. I'll send over the contract details and we can schedule a follow-up to discuss budget and production schedule. Welcome to Spotify, Sophie." When the call ended, I sat in the garage for a long time, staring at Marcus's broken elliptical machine and the boxes of his ex-girlfriend's stuff and the Christmas lights that didn't work, the smell of motor oil and old cardboard, the sound of traffic on the street outside, that constant Los Angeles hum. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. My phone buzzed. Another text from Claire. "Hello, are you ignoring me? Coffee this weekend, yes or yes?" I looked at the message for a long time. In my previous life, I would have said yes, would have shown up at Blue Bottle or Alfred's or wherever she wanted, would have told her all about the podcast, about the Spotify deal, about my dreams and plans and ideas, and she would have listened with those wide, innocent eyes, would have asked thoughtful questions, would have taken mental notes. And then she would have taken everything. I typed out a response. "Busy this weekend, maybe next month?" Then I deleted it and wrote, "Can't, sorry, swamped with work stuff." Send. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Okay, let me know when you have time." I turned off my phone and went back to work. The contract arrived 2 days later. 47 pages of legal language that I read 3 times, looking for hidden clauses or traps. But it was straightforward. Spotify would pay me $150,000 for 2 seasons of Inherited, provide production support and studio access, and handle all marketing and distribution. I'd maintain creative control with editorial input from their team. They'd own the exclusive rights to the show for 3 years, after which we'd renegotiate. $150,000. I'd been making $47,000 a year at BuzzHive, managing Instagram accounts for dog food companies, and struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment in Koreatown where the hot water was temperamental and the upstairs neighbor practiced tap dancing at 6 a.m. This was life-changing money. Quit your job money, focus on your art money. I signed the contract at a FedEx office on Wilshire, the clerk witnessing my signature with the bored expression of someone who witnessed 1,000 signatures a day and had stopped believing any of them meant anything. But this one meant everything. I gave my notice at BuzzHive on a Friday. My boss, a 32-year-old named Trevor, who wore exclusively athleisure and talked constantly about disrupting the digital space, seemed genuinely confused. "But you're so good at this," he said, gesturing vaguely at my computer's screen, where I had 17 tabs open for different client accounts. "You're one of our best content creators." "I appreciate that," I said, and I did, sort of. But I'm pursuing another opportunity. Like what? Another agency? A podcast? His expression shifted from confusion to something like pity. "Oh, well, good luck with that. You know how saturated that market is, right?" "Everyone and their mom has a podcast now." "Yes," I wanted to say. "I know exactly how saturated the market is. I know which podcasts will succeed and which will fail. I know that true crime is about to collapse, that Spotify will pay millions for the right content. That in 3 years everyone will be talking about Inherited, and nobody will remember your dog food Instagram accounts. But I just smiled and said, I'm willing to take the risk. The first month of production was a blur of interviews and editing and learning to use audio software that was more complex than I remembered. Spotify set me up with a producer named Alex. Non-binary, late 20s, with pink hair and a septum piercing and an encyclopedic knowledge of sound design. The key, Alex said during our first session adjusting levels on the mixing board, is to make people forget they're listening to something produced. You want it to feel intimate, like the person is talking directly to them. No one wants to feel like they're listening to a radio show. I knew this, had learned it the hard way in my previous life, listening to Claire's podcast and recognizing all the techniques I'd planned to use. But I let Alex explain it anyway, nodding and taking notes. Because this time, I had support. This time, I wasn't alone in my closet with winter coats as an audience. We recorded 6 interviews in the first 2 weeks. The Vietnam vet with the purple heart, the woman with the hotel soaps, a man who'd inherited his mother's wigs from her cancer treatment, a daughter who'd received her father's collection of paper bags. He'd saved every single bag from every grocery trip for 40 years, flattened and stacked in a closet, for reasons no one understood. Each interview was 3 hours of conversation edited down to 20 minutes of story. I learned to cut ruthlessly, to find the emotional core, to let silence do the work. Alex was impressed. You have really good instincts for this, they said. Have you done much interview work before? Some, I said vaguely. I've always been interested in people's stories. What I didn't say, I'd done these exact interviews before. In my previous life, I knew which questions would make Mrs. Harrison cry, knew that James Chen would laugh uncomfortably before revealing that he talks to the false teeth sometimes, knew that Sarah would pause for exactly 7 seconds before saying that her mother's pot roast recipe was the only proof she had that she'd been loved. I knew all of it because I'd lived it once already. And this time, I was going to do it right. Claire called in June. I was in the Spotify studio, editing the Hotel Soap episode, when my phone lit up with her name. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Oh my God, finally! I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Are you okay? Mom said you've been really busy with work. Yeah, just a lot going on. Too busy for your sister? Her voice had that edge to it, playful but with teeth. What's going on? New boyfriend? Secret life as a spy? Just work stuff. A pause. Then, Mom mentioned something about a podcast. Are you still doing that? My hand stilled on the keyboard. Who told her that? I don't know. She just mentioned it. Said you'd quit your job. Sophie, what's happening? We used to tell each other everything. No, I wanted to say. You used to extract information from me and use it for your own benefit. There's a difference. I got a deal with Spotify, I said. Might as well rip the Band-Aid off. For a narrative podcast series. It launches in September. Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped, then that's amazing. Congratulations! Her voice was doing something strange. The words were right, but the tone was wrong, like she was reading from a script and forgot her motivation. What's it about? Family heirlooms, the weird stuff people inherit? Another pause. I could practically hear her brain working, connecting dots, remembering our conversation from months ago. That hadn't happened yet in this timeline when I'd shown her my pilot. Except I hadn't shown her. This time, I'd kept it to myself. That's a really interesting concept, she said slowly. Really unique. How did you come up with it? Just something I've been thinking about for a while? Huh. A beat. Well, I'd love to hear it when it comes out. Maybe we could collaborate sometime. I've been thinking about getting into podcasting myself, though could use your expertise. And there it was. The opening move. The innocent suggestion that would become a stolen idea, a stolen show, a stolen life. I'm pretty busy right now, I said, but maybe down the line. Sure. Hey, are you coming to Mom's on Sunday? She's making the lemon chicken. I'll try. You'll try? Sophie, it's family dinner. You always come. I said I'll try. I hung up before she could say anything else. The show launched on September 15th, 2019. Spotify promoted it on their homepage, in their podcast newsletter, on their social media. They'd created beautiful cover art, a vintage photograph of hands holding a thimble, the edges soft and slightly blurred like a memory. Within the first week, we hit 500,000 downloads. Within the first month, we'd crossed 2 million. The reviews were overwhelming. People loved the intimacy, the emotion, the way each episode felt like a secret being shared. They loved how it made them think about their own families, their own inherited objects, their own complicated relationships with the dead. "This podcast made me cry in my car," wrote one reviewer. "I had to pull over." "Finally, a show that treats grief like the weird, messy thing it actually is," wrote another. "Sophie Chen is a master storyteller. Each episode is a perfect little gem." The press picked it up. Articles in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Rolling Stone. I did interviews on NPR, on late-night podcasts, on morning shows. Everyone wanted to know how I'd come up with the concept, how I'd found these stories, how I'd created something that felt so intimate and authentic. I smiled and said the right things. I talked about my grandmother's thimble, about the importance of preserving family histories, about the power of small objects to contain enormous meaning. What I didn't say, I'd done this all before. I'd lived through the version where my sister took credit for my work, and now I was living through the version where I got there first. And it felt like justice. Claire sent me a text in October. "Saw your podcast is doing really well. So proud of you. Want to grab coffee and celebrate?" I deleted it without responding. She tried again in November. "Hey, weird question, but do you remember that conversation we had about family heirlooms? I swear we talked about it at some point. Your podcast just reminded me." Delete. December. "Are you coming to Christmas? Mom's worried about you." Delete. January 2020. "Sophie, seriously? What's going on? Did I do something to upset you? Can we please talk?" I stared at that one for a long time. My thumb hovered over the delete button. Did I do something to upset you? In this timeline? No. In this timeline, she was innocent. Had done nothing except exist in proximity to my success, had asked reasonable questions about a project I'd never shown her. But in the other timeline, the real timeline, the one that counted, she'd stolen everything from me, had smiled to my face while mining my dreams for material, had built her career on the foundation of my ideas, and then acted like she'd done me a favor by mentioning me in her acknowledgments. My sister Sophie, who always believed in me, she'd written in the back of her book. As if I'd been a cheerleader instead of a victim. As if she'd done the believing instead of the stealing. I deleted the message. Season 2 of Inherited launched in March 2020. Just as the world shut down for COVID, people were trapped at home, scared and lonely and looking for connection. The podcast became a lifeline, a reminder that love persisted even through death, that memory was a form of survival. Downloads tripled. We hit the top 10 on the podcast charts. Spotify renewed for 2 more seasons. I bought a house in Echo Park, a small Spanish bungalow with a fig tree in the backyard, and original tile in the bathroom. My own studio, soundproofed and professional, where I could record without the winter coats watching. I adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Bowie, who slept under the mixing desk while I worked. I dated a little, casually, nothing serious. Went to therapy for the first time in my life, and tried to explain to the therapist that I felt like I was living in a timeline that wasn't mine, that I'd died and come back, and couldn't shake the feeling that reality was a thin membrane that might tear at any moment. "That sounds like dissociation," the therapist said. "Have you considered that you might be processing trauma?" "What kind of trauma?" "That's what we're here to figure out." I stopped going after 3 sessions. Marcus died in July 2021. Cardiac arrest at a music festival just like before, just like he was always going to. I got the call from his sister at 4 a.m. I was in bed, Bowie curled against my legs, the ceiling fan making its slow rotation above me. The phone rang, and I knew what it was going to be before I answered. "Sophie, it's Emma." "I'm sorry to call so early, but it's Marcus. There was an accident. He's gone." The room tilted, became liquid, became nothing. "Sophie, are you there?" I'd known this would happen, had watched it happen once before, had thought somehow that changing my own timeline would change his too, that the universe owed me something, had given me this second chance for a reason beyond just my own success. But Marcus was still dead, and I hadn't saved him, couldn't save him, had never been able to. "I'm here," I said, My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from underwater. I'm so sorry, Emma. The funeral was on a Wednesday. Open casket, which felt wrong. Marcus would have hated the formality, the suits, the forced solemnity. He would have wanted a party, wanted music. Wanted everyone to get high and tell embarrassing stories and laugh until they cried. But his family was traditional. They did the viewing, the prayers, the ritual of grief performed for public consumption. I stood by the casket and looked at his face, too waxy, too still, too not Marcus, and thought about timelines, about the choices we make and the choices made for us, about the things we can change and the things we can't. I'd saved myself, but I couldn't save him. Claire showed up at the funeral. I saw her in the back row wearing a black dress I didn't recognize, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She caught my eye and smiled sadly, a look of sympathetic solidarity. I turned away. After the service, she approached me in the parking lot. I was sitting in my car, hands on the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. She knocked on the window. I considered driving away, just putting the car in gear and leaving her there, confused and hurt. But something in me, some residual muscle memory of sisterhood, of the relationship we used to have before she ruined it, made me roll down the window. "Hey," she said, "I'm so sorry about Marcus. I know you two were close. Thanks. Do you want to get coffee or, I don't know, talk?" "Not really," she flinched. "Sophie, what did I do? Why won't you talk to me anymore?" The question hung in the air between us. In this timeline, she'd done nothing, was guilty only of asking questions, of expressing interest in her sister's work. In this timeline, I was the villain, the successful sister who'd cut off contact for no apparent reason, who'd ghosted her family, who'd become cold and distant and strange. But I remembered the other timeline, remembered every moment of betrayal, every stolen idea, every smile that hid calculation. "You didn't do anything," I said finally. "That's the problem." "I don't understand." "I know you don't." I rolled up the window and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot, small in my rearview mirror, shrinking until she disappeared. The book deal came in October 2021. Random House offered $400,000 for a collection of essays based on the podcast, stories about inheritance and family and the weird ways we try to hold on to love after the people we love are gone. I signed it. The book came out in March 2022 and hit the New York Times bestseller list in its first week. I did a book tour, readings in independent bookstores, signings where people cried and told me about their own inherited objects, their own losses, their own attempts to make meaning from the debris of family. A woman in Portland told me about her father's watch, still set to East Coast time even though he'd lived in Oregon for 30 years. A man in Austin described his mother's shopping lists, each one ending with a note to herself, "Don't forget to be happy." A college student in Boston brought me her grandmother's lipstick. Revlon red, worn down to a nub, never thrown away. Each story was an echo of the podcast, a variation on the theme. Each person was trying to tell me, "I understand. I'm doing this too. We're all just trying to hold on to something that's already gone." And I listened, and I signed their books, and I thought about Marcus, about the timeline where I'd saved my career but couldn't save my friend, about the choices we make and the prices we pay. Oh, my mother called in May. "Sophie, we need to talk about Claire." I was in my studio, editing an episode about a man who'd inherited his father's toupee. Bowie was asleep under the desk, his paws twitching with dog dreams. "What about her?" "She's struggling. Won't tell me why, but I can tell. And she keeps asking about you. Wants to know why you won't see her." "I'm busy, Mom." "You're not too busy for family." "Aren't I?" A sigh, deep and disappointed. "What happened between you two? You used to be so close." "Used to be," past tense, like our relationship was a photograph from childhood, something preserved in amber that couldn't exist in the present. "We grew apart," I said. "No. Growing apart is gradual. This was sudden. One day you were talking about your podcast together, the next you'd cut her out completely. Did she say something?" Do something?" "She didn't do anything, Mom." "Then why?" "Because she would have." The words came out before I could stop them, sharp and certain. "Because I know her. I know what she would have done if I'd given her the chance." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "Sophie, that doesn't make any sense." "I know. Are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone? A professional?" I'm fine. You don't sound fine. You sound, I don't know, angry at something I can't see. She wasn't wrong. I was angry at a version of Claire who didn't exist in this timeline, at a betrayal that had never happened, at a future I'd prevented by destroying the relationship preemptively. I have to go, I said. I have work. Sophie? I hung up. The Netflix deal came in August 2022. They wanted to adapt Inherited into a docuseries, each episode following the podcast format but with visual elements, showing the objects, the families, the interviews, 6 episodes with an option for more. The meeting was at their offices in Hollywood, in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the hills. 3 executives, all under 40, all wearing the unofficial Netflix uniform of expensive casual. "We see this as a prestige project," said the woman in charge, Melissa something, VP of documentary something. The kind of show that wins Emmys and gets people talking. Very Queer Eye meets 13th, emotional but smart. I nodded, trying to focus on her words instead of the memory scratching at the back of my brain. Claire in this same building, in a different conference room, pitching her version of this show. Claire signing a deal, Claire winning an Emmy. Claire thanking everyone who believed in this project, especially my sister Sophie, who inspired me. Except that hadn't happened. Wouldn't happen. This was my meeting. My deal. My Emmy. "We'd want you as an executive producer," Melissa continued. "Obviously, you'd be involved in every aspect. Casting, interviews, creative direction. This is your vision. We're just helping you realize it." What's the timeline? "We'd aim to start production in January, premiere next fall. We'd promote it heavily, tie it to the podcast, do a whole multimedia push. This could be huge." Could be, would be, was in another timeline. I signed the deal that afternoon. Claire tried one more time in September. She showed up at my house, the Spanish bungalow in Echo Park with the fig tree and the soundproof studio. Just knocked on the door at 9 a.m. on a Saturday when I was in my pajamas drinking coffee and reading through production notes for the Netflix show. Bowie barked. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing on my porch, her hands shoved in the pockets of her jacket, looking smaller than I remembered. I could have pretended not to be home, could have ignored her until she left. But something made me open the door. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stood there, sister-shaped strangers, with 3 feet of space and 7 years of alternate timelines between us. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Why?" "Because we need to talk. Because I miss you. Because I don't understand what happened to us." I should have said no, should have closed the door, maintained the boundary I'd built so carefully. But I was tired of avoiding her, of carrying the weight of knowledge she didn't have, of being angry at crimes she'd never committed. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on my couch, the vintage mid-century one I'd found on Craigslist, reupholstered in navy velvet, and looked around the room, at the bookshelves lined with hardcovers and vinyl records, at the framed New York Times bestseller list on the wall, at the Emmy I'd won last year sitting on the mantel like it was no big deal. "You've done so well," she said. "I'm really proud of you." "Are you?" "Of course I am. You're my sister. Why wouldn't I be proud?" I sat in the chair across from her, Bowie settling at my feet. "You tell me." "Sophie, I don't know what I did to make you hate me, but I'm sorry. Whatever it was, I'm sorry." "You didn't do anything. Then why won't you talk to me?" "Well, why won't you come to family dinners? Why did you disappear from my life?" The questions were fair, reasonable. In this timeline, I was the irrational one, the sister who'd succeeded and then abandoned her family for no apparent reason. But in the other timeline, "Do you remember," I said slowly, "that conversation we had about family heirlooms years ago?" She frowned. "Vaguely, we've talked about a lot of things. I had an idea for a podcast about inherited objects, the weird stuff people pass down." "Right, and you made it. Inherited. It's incredible." In another version of this conversation, I showed you my pilot first, asked for your opinion. "Okay." "And you listened to it, took notes, asked good questions, seemed really supportive. I would have been supportive. And then 3 months later, you launched your own podcast, called it Heirlooms. Same concept, different name. You used your PR connections to build buzz, got picked up by Spotify, got a book deal, got a Netflix series. You thanked me in the acknowledgments." Claire's face went through several expressions at once: confusion, hurt, anger, understanding. "Sophie, that never happened." "I know." So why are you acting like it did? I looked at her for a long time. At my sister, who in this timeline was innocent, who had never stolen from me, never betrayed me, never built her success on the foundation of my dreams, but who would have, given the chance. I was certain of it. Because I know you, I said. I know who you are, and I couldn't risk it. Risk what? Losing everything again. Again? Sophie, you're not making sense. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe the universe had given me a second chance, and I'd used it to become paranoid and isolated, to destroy a relationship that hadn't needed destroying, to punish someone for crimes they hadn't committed yet. Or maybe I'd saved myself, had learned from one life and applied it to another, had protected my work, my dreams, my future. I didn't know anymore. I think you should go, I said. Claire stood up. Tears were running down her face, which surprised me. I'd forgotten she could cry for something other than her own success. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, she said. I hope all this, she gestured at the room, at the Emmy, at my life, makes you happy. She left, and I sat there with Bowie's head in my lap, listening to her car start and drive away. The Netflix show premiered in October 2023. 6 episodes, a beautifully shot, emotionally devastating. The reviews were glowing. The viewership numbers were strong. I did press, attended screenings, smiled for cameras. At the premiere party, a rooftop event in West Hollywood with catering and champagne and people who wanted to talk about how my work had changed their lives, I stood at the edge of the crowd and thought about Marcus, about how I'd changed my timeline, but not his. About how he'd died the same death in both versions of reality. About how maybe some things were inevitable, scripted into the universe like code, unchangeable no matter how many do-overs you got. A woman approached me, late 30s, expensive clothes, the kind of subtle wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Sophie Chen? I'm Jessica Harmon. I produce a podcast called Second Chances. Stories about people who got to reinvent their lives. Congratulations, I said automatically. I'd love to interview you. Your story is incredible. Quitting your job, taking a risk, building all this from nothing? It's inspiring. From nothing. As if I hadn't died first. As if I hadn't lived an entire life of failure before getting the chance to try again. I'm not sure I'm the right fit, I said. Why not? Because my success was built on information that shouldn't exist. Because I'd stolen from my own future. Because I'd let my best friend die twice, and my sister become a stranger, and my life become this pristine, successful, lonely thing. I don't think my story is what you think it is, I said. She smiled. That's what everyone says. And it's always more interesting than they realize. She handed me her card, embossed, expensive, and disappeared back into the party. I looked at the card for a moment, then dropped it in my champagne glass and watched the ink bleed into bubbles. I sold the house in Echo Park in December 2023. Bought something smaller in Laurel Canyon, on a quiet street where the trees grew dense and you couldn't see your neighbors. A place where I could work without feeling like the walls were closing in. Bowie loved it. The backyard was bigger, wilder, full of smells and small creatures to chase. I recorded season 5 of the podcast there in a studio I built in the converted garage. The theme was digital inheritance, voicemails, text messages, social media accounts of the dead. One episode featured a woman whose mother had died and left behind an Instagram account full of sunset photos. The daughter kept it active, posting occasional updates, unable to let the account die even though the person was gone. It feels like she's still here, the daughter said in the interview. Like, if I stop posting, she'll really be dead. I understood that. The way we try to keep things alive that are already gone. The way we haunt our own lives with alternative versions, other timelines, roads not taken. My mother died in March 2024. Stroke. Sudden. She was at the grocery store, reaching for a box of pasta, and then she was on the floor, and then she was in the hospital, and then she was gone. I got the call from my father. He was calm, eerily calm, his voice flat as he explained the medical details, the timeline, the funeral arrangements. Claire's flying in tomorrow, he said. You should come too. I hadn't seen Claire in over a year. Oh, hadn't spoken to her since that morning in my living room when she'd cried and I'd sent her away. But our mother was dead. So I went. The funeral was small. Our father had chosen cremation, a memorial service at the house, the lemon chicken recipe framed on the wall like art. Claire was there when I arrived, standing in the kitchen that had belonged to our mother, wearing a black dress and too much makeup. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked at me. I looked at her. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stood there in our mother's kitchen, surrounded by casserole dishes brought by neighbors, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten her lemon chicken. Had avoided family dinners for so long that I'd lost count of the meals I'd missed, the moments I'd traded for the safety of distance. "She asked about you," Claire said. "All the time. Wanted to know why you wouldn't visit." "I was busy. You were hiding." "From what?" "From me. From whatever you think I did or was going to do. From being part of this family." She wasn't wrong. I'd built my success on isolation, on protecting myself from a betrayal that had never happened, on treating everyone like a potential threat. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Claire looked surprised. "For what? For all of it? For disappearing? For making you the villain in a story that only happened in my head?" "I don't understand." "I know. That's okay." We stood there in silence, and then Claire did something unexpected. She hugged me, just pulled me into her arms and held on, and I let her, and we cried together in our dead mother's kitchen over all the time we'd lost and all the meals we'd never share again. Noon after the funeral, after the guests left and our father went to bed, Claire and I sat in the backyard, the same backyard where we'd played as kids, where we'd buried our hamster in a shoebox, where we'd learned to climb the avocado tree that was still there, older and gnarled but alive. "Tell me the truth," Claire said. "Why did you cut me out?" I thought about lying, about keeping the secret of my rebirth, my second chance, my knowledge of the future, but I was tired of secrets, tired of carrying the weight of two timelines. So I told her, all of it. The Tesla, the dying, the waking up 7 years in the past, the podcast I'd made in my closet, the pilot I'd shown her in the other timeline, the way she'd stolen it and built her career on my dreams. She listened without interrupting, her face going through 1,000 micro-expressions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "That's insane. I know. But I believe you." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because it explains everything. Why you changed. Why you became so guarded. Why you look at me sometimes like I'm a stranger." She paused. "I'm sorry for what I did. Even if I didn't do it in this timeline, even if it was a different version of me, I'm sorry." "It wasn't you," I said. "Not the you that exists now." "But it could have been, right? If you'd shown me your work, if I'd seen an opportunity, and if I'd been ambitious enough or desperate enough or convinced myself it was collaboration instead of theft, it could have been me." She was right. The Claire who had stolen from me and the Claire sitting next to me in the avocado tree's shadow were the same person, just with different circumstances. Different choices. "Would you have done it?" I asked. "If I'd shown you the pilot? If I'd asked for your help? Would you have stolen it?" She thought about it. Really thought about it, instead of giving me the easy answer. "I don't know," she said finally. "The me from back then? Maybe. I was so hungry to prove myself, so desperate to be successful. I might have convinced myself it was okay, that I was just inspired by you, that imitation was flattery." She looked at me. "But I'd like to think I wouldn't have. I'd like to think I'm better than that." "We're all capable of being worse than we think we are," I said, "given the right circumstances." "Is that why you've been so alone? Because you don't trust anyone?" "Maybe. Not even me. Especially not you." It hurt her. I could see it in her face, the way she flinched slightly. But she didn't argue. "What do we do now?" she asked. "I don't know." We sat there under the avocado tree, two sisters with one lifetime between them, and I thought about Marcus, about how I'd saved myself but couldn't save him, about how maybe the universe didn't give you do-overs to fix everything, just to make different mistakes. "I'm getting married," Claire said suddenly. "What?" "Next spring. To David. You met him once, briefly, before you stopped talking to me. He's kind, patient, loves me even though I'm a mess." "Congratulations." "Will you come to the wedding?" I thought about it, about weddings and families, and the way we try to stitch our lives together into something that looks like love, about whether I could sit in a church or a garden or a beach and watch my sister promise forever to someone, knowing that in another timeline she'd stolen my future. "Yes," I said, "I'll come." The wedding was in April 2025 at a vineyard in Ojai. Claire wore a simple dress, no train, no veil. David cried when he saw her. Their vows were personal and funny and real, none of that generic in sickness and in health nonsense, but actual promises they thought they could keep. I sat in the third row next to my father and thought about timelines. About how in my first life, I might have been a bridesmaid, might have helped Claire pick the dress, plan the menu, address the invitations, might have given a toast about growing up together, about sisterhood, about love. But in this life, I was just a guest. A stranger in formal clothes, watching my sister marry someone I barely knew. After the ceremony during the reception, Claire found me at the bar. "Hey," she said, "having fun?" "It's a beautiful wedding." "That's not what I asked." I looked at her. In the golden light of the vineyard, she looked radiant, happy, like someone who'd found what they were looking for. "I'm glad you're happy," I said. "I'm glad you came." We stood there, drinks in hand, the party swirling around us. "I've been thinking," Claire said, "about what you told me about the other timeline. Yeah? Do you think I'm happy there? The version of me who stole your podcast?" I thought about it. The Claire from my first life, with her Spotify deal and her Netflix series and her book, the Claire who'd built success on my foundation and smiled for cameras and seemed to have everything. "I don't know," I said honestly. She was successful, but I'm not sure that's the same as happy. Are you happy? Here now with everything you've built? Was I? I had the career I'd always wanted. The house, the dog, the Emmy on the mantle. I'd protected my work, my ideas, my dreams from theft, but I'd lost Marcus. Lost years with my mother. Lost the relationship with my sister that might have been, in some other configuration of choices and trust. "I'm successful," I said. "That's something?" Claire smiled sadly. "That's not what I asked." I started therapy again in June 2025. A different therapist this time, a woman named Dr. Sarah Park, who specialized in trauma and grief. I told her about the Tesla, about dying, about waking up 7 years in the past. She listened without judgment. "Do you think you actually died and traveled back in time?" she asked. "I don't know what I think. What if I suggested that what you experienced was a near-death experience that created a very vivid narrative? That your brain, in those moments of trauma, constructed an elaborate story to help you process something? Like a hallucination? Like a coping mechanism? Your brain showed you an alternate version of your life. One where you'd made different choices, protected yourself differently, and when you survived the accident, that narrative became a template. I thought about it, about the possibility that I'd never actually died, never actually lived a whole other life, that it was all just trauma and brain chemistry and a very convincing delusion. "Does it matter?" I asked. "If it was real or not? Does it matter to you?" "I don't know. The choices I made were real. The consequences were real. Whether I actually lived through a different timeline or just believe I did, I still pushed my sister away, still isolated myself, still built my life around protecting against a betrayal that maybe never would have happened." "And how does that make you feel?" "Like I wasted my second chance." Marcus's sister, Emma, called me in August. "I'm cleaning out his stuff," she said. "Finally. It's been 4 years, but I couldn't do it before now." "I understand." I found something, a box labeled Sophie's Podcast. He'd kept all your notes, your research, recordings from your early sessions. I thought you might want it. "Yes," I said. "Please." The box arrived a week later. I opened it in my studio, Bowie watching curiously as I pulled out notebooks, flash drives, printed emails. And there, at the bottom, was a letter. Addressed to me in Marcus's handwriting. "Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead." Morbid, I know, but let's be honest about my lifestyle choices. I wanted you to know that helping you launch your podcast was one of the best things I ever did. Not because it became successful, but because I got to watch you become brave. You were so scared at first. Scared of failure, scared of rejection, scared that your ideas weren't good enough. But you did it anyway. That's the thing about you, Soph. You're afraid of everything, but you do it anyway. That's not the absence of fear, that's courage. Whatever happens with your career, whatever success or failure comes your way, remember that you already did the hard part. You showed up for yourself. You believed in your work enough to put it out into the world. That's all any of us can do. So love you, weirdo. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, crying messily into Bowie's fur. Marcus had written this before he died. Before the festival, before the fentanyl, before the porta potty at 3 a.m., had written it and put it in a box and labeled it with my name, like he knew, like he'd wanted to leave me something to inherit. I called Claire that night. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Are you busy? Never too busy for you? What's up?" I was thinking maybe we could have coffee this weekend. Talk? A pause. Then, "I'd like that." We met at a place in Silver Lake, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a kombucha tap, the kind of place we would have made fun of together once, before I'd cut her out of my life. "So," she said, settling into her chair with a matcha latte, "what made you call?" I showed her Marcus's letter. She read it slowly, her eyes getting wet. "He was a good friend," she said, handing it back. "The best. You miss him?" "Every day." We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe noise swirling around us. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, "about whether I'm happy. And I'm not. I'm successful, but I'm not happy. I built this whole life around protecting myself, and all I did was make myself lonely. So what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know. Try to be different, I guess. Try to trust people. Try to stop living like the other timeline is going to catch up with me." Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm glad you're here, in this timeline. Even if it took us years to figure out how to be sisters again." "Me too." I announced Season 6 of Inherited in September 2025. The theme was second chances. Stories about people who'd gotten to reinvent their lives, start over, try again. Stories about divorced people who'd remarried, about addicts who'd gotten sober, about failures who'd become successes. And one episode, the finale, about a woman who died and come back to life and spent years believing she'd traveled through time. I interviewed myself, sat in my studio with the microphone between us, me as host, me as subject, and told the whole story. The Tesla, the impact, the waking up 7 years earlier, the podcast I'd launched, the sister I'd pushed away, the friend I couldn't save. Do you think it was real? I asked myself. The time travel? I don't know, I answered. Oh, I believed it was real. Acted like it was real. Made choices based on it being real. Does it matter if it actually happened or if my brain constructed an elaborate narrative to help me process trauma? Yes? No. Both? Both. I kept the episode, edited it carefully, added music, made it beautiful and strange and true. When it aired in December, the response was overwhelming. People wrote to say they'd had similar experiences, near-death moments that felt like glimpses into other timelines, trauma that rewrote their understanding of reality, the sense that they were living a life that wasn't quite theirs. "You made me feel less crazy," one woman wrote. "I thought I was the only one." "This episode saved my life," wrote another. "I was planning to end it. But hearing you talk about second chances made me reconsider. I read every message, responded to some, let others sit in my inbox like small miracles. Claire and I had dinner on Christmas Eve, just the two of us, in the house in Laurel Canyon, with Bowie begging for scraps under the table. I made lemon chicken. Our mother's recipe, copied from the index card that was now in a frame on my wall. It came out slightly dry, the couscous a little overcooked, but it tasted like memory, like home." "This is good," Claire said, though we both knew it wasn't quite right. Mom was better at it. Everything was better when Mom made it. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Claire said, "I listened to your episode, the one about time travel." "Yeah? It was beautiful. Brave, I'm proud of you." "Thanks. Do you still think about it?" The other timeline?" "Every day, but differently now. Not like it's chasing me, but like it's, I don't know, a story I used to believe, a dream I had once." "Do you think I would have stolen your podcast? In the other timeline?" I'd thought about this question for years, turned it over in my mind like a stone, examining every angle. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But I know I can't build my life around being afraid of what might have happened. I have to live in this timeline with this version of you. And this version of you. And this version of me. We finished dinner and moved to the couch, Bowie between us, and watched a terrible Christmas movie on Netflix, the kind with predictable plot points and actors who looked too perfect and a happy ending that felt earned because everyone had suffered exactly the right amount. Halfway through, Claire fell asleep on my shoulder. I didn't move. Just sat there with my sister's weight against me and the dog's warmth at my side and the television light flickering across the room. This was my life. Not the one I'd imagined, not the one I'd feared, but the one I'd actually built through choices and mistakes and learning to trust again. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The book came out in March 2026. Second Chances, Essays on Inheritance, Loss, and the Stories We Tell Ourselves. It was part memoir, part philosophy, part meditation on time and choice, and the strange ways we haunt our own lives. I wrote about my grandmother's thimble, about Marcus's letter, about the podcast that had changed everything, and I wrote about Claire, about the sister I'd pushed away and the sister I'd found again, about the betrayal that had never happened and the forgiveness I'd given anyway, about learning to live with uncertainty, with the knowledge that we're all capable of both cruelty and kindness, theft and generosity, selfishness and love. The book did well, not as well as the first one, but well enough. Enough to justify another tour, more readings, more people telling me their stories in bookstore aisles and coffee shop lines. At a reading in San Francisco, a woman asked, "Do you regret anything? If you really did travel back in time, would you do it differently?" I thought about it, about the choices I'd made, the relationships I'd damaged, the years I'd spent in isolation, about Marcus, who I couldn't save no matter how many timelines I lived through, about Claire, who I'd punished for crimes she'd never committed, about my mother, one whose lemon chicken I'd refused to eat until it was too late. Yes, I said, I'd do it differently. I'd be braver, kinder, I'd trust people more and fear less. I'd understand that protecting yourself isn't the same as living. But you wouldn't give up the success? The podcast, the books, all of it? No, I said. I wouldn't give that up, but I'd try to hold it more lightly. Remember that success without connection is just noise. I'm writing this on a Wednesday in April 2026. 7 years since I woke up in Marcus's garage with the pop filter going thwap, thwap, and the knowledge of the future folded up inside me like a map. 7 years since I got my second chance, or my first chance, depending on how you count timelines. The podcast is still going. Season 8 is in production. This one about inherited silences, the stories families don't tell, the truths that die with people because no one thought to ask the questions before it was too late. Claire is pregnant. Due in August. She calls me every day with updates. The weird cravings, the back pain, the terror of becoming responsible for another human life. I have no idea what I'm doing, she said yesterday. No one does, I told her. That's the secret of parenting. Everyone's just making it up as they go. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. It's just true. She laughed. Asked if I'd be the godmother. I said yes. Sometimes I still think about the other timeline, about the Sophie who died on Sunset Boulevard with nothing to show for her life except a LinkedIn profile and expired yogurt. About the Claire who built her success on stolen dreams and seemed happy but maybe wasn't. About the version of reality where I never got a second chance, never launched the podcast, never wrote the books, never became the person I am now. That Sophie is still inside me somewhere, still scrolling through Instagram in my studio apartment, still managing dog food accounts, still planning to show her sister a podcast pilot, and not understanding, not even a little bit, what that choice will cost her. I think about her with compassion now, with tenderness. She was doing her best with what she knew. We all are. There's a Hemingway quote I think about sometimes. The world breaks everyone, and afterward, some are strong at the broken places. But I think he got it wrong. The world doesn't break everyone. Some of us break ourselves, make choices that fracture us, protect ourselves so thoroughly we become impenetrable. You've got to build walls so high we forget what we were trying to keep out. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out how to be whole again. The Tesla didn't kill me. Or it did, and I came back. Or I never died at all, just created an elaborate narrative to explain the random luck of success, the guilt of winning, the uncomfortable truth that sometimes ambition requires a kind of ruthlessness that looks an awful lot like betrayal. I don't know which version is true. I'm not sure it matters anymore. What matters is that I'm here now in this timeline. The one where I launched my podcast first and got the Spotify deal, the one where I pushed my sister away and then pulled her back, the one where I couldn't save Marcus but learned to live with the grief of his loss. This timeline, with all its mistakes and miracles, so its loneliness and love, its stolen futures and second chances. This imperfect, complicated, beautiful life that I've built from scratch, twice. I'm recording a new episode today. It's about my grandmother's thimble, the one I inherited when she died, the one I thought was boring, the one that turned out to contain entire universes of meaning. I've told this story before. It was the pilot, the beginning of everything, but I want to tell it again, differently. With the wisdom of time and distance and understanding that stories change as we change, that the same object can mean different things depending on when you're looking at it. The thimble sits on my desk now, plastic, cracked, smelling faintly of cedar. It's traveled with me through 2 timelines, this thimble, through death and rebirth and all the messy living in between. It's just a thimble. It's everything. I pick it up, turn it over in my palm, feel the geography of its tiny dents and scratches. Then I lean into the microphone and begin. My grandmother left me a thimble when she died. And somewhere, in some other timeline, another version of me is doing the same thing. Or not doing it at all. Or doing something completely different. But here, now, in this moment, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. The pop filter makes its wet sound. Thwap, thwap. And I breathe into it, and the breath becomes words, and the words become a story. And the story, against all odds, becomes a life.